So last time around, we created our Facebook authentication strategy. The verify callback stage here gives us an opportunity to store user information in a local database. And Passport does not enforce an opinion in this matter. This means that your app can store and fetch data in any which way it wants to, and the implementation is left to us. We'll use our MongoDB instance to store user data locally. Now, since we're using Mongoose as the interface to MongoDB, one of the key features we get is the ability to craft a schema. A schema is a structure that defines how the data should be modeled and stored in the database. This is a precondition as far as traditional relational databases go, however, is not a requirement in the NoSQL world of MongoDB. However, Mongoose allows us to bring sanity and structure into this schema-free universe. So before we get down to storing and fetching data from our MongoDB instance on MongoLab, we'll first create a schema that defines a single user that authenticates in using either Facebook or Twitter. So open your DB module file and let's create a user schema. Begin by creating a constant called chat_user, and we'll type new mongoose.schema and we'll pass in an object that maps 3 keys to their data types. First up, we have profile ID, which will be of the type string. Profile ID will be the user ID that is returned by the authentication provider. The second key stores the full name of the user as fetched from the authentication provider. Obviously, this will be a string. And finally, we want to store the URI to the user's profile picture, and this will be stored using a key called profile pic. Now, to create an instance of this user, we will have to turn this into a model. That will be done by creating a variable called user model and using the mongoose.model method to first name the user model, and we'll use the name chat user here as well, and then referring to the schema that we've just defined. This model then allows us to create new documents and store in a collection. Now, since we are calling our model chat user, this will result in a new collection being created in our MongoDB instance called chat users, which is the plural of chat user. Mongoose does that automatically, and you can log into MongoLab once this entire workflow is up and running and see this for yourself. Now, this user model is also something that we would want to export out of the DB module. So let's just do that like so. Alright, in the verify callback method, the first thing that we need to do is to query our collection, which we know by now will be called chat users, to find a user record where the profile ID value matches what Facebook returns back as profile.id. Remember, profile here refers to the user profile that we get from Facebook during the authentication process, and this is an object. Hence, we are accessing the ID key using profile.id to get the user ID value. So first, we need a way to query our database for this record. We'll write this in the helpers module. So open up the index.js file in the helpers folder, and first let me import the DB module here since we need to interact with our database. And then let's write a function that finds a single document based on a given parameter. Since we want to query by profile ID, this method will accept that as an argument and will return an instance of db.userModel.findOne method. The findOne method finds exactly one record and is available on the user model which we created earlier and exported out of the DB module. Within the findOne method, we'll pass in an object which maps the key to be queried to the value that we want to query with. Interestingly enough, this method returns a promise. Some methods in Mongoose are equipped to return promises. Now, you can really write this function directly in your authentication module, but I like to wrap it this way and organize it as one of the helper functions. Feel free to directly write this method without turning it into a helper. Now, in the authentication module, let's bring the helper module in like so. And inside the auth processor function, let's invoke h.findOne and we'll pass in the profile.id value as returned from Facebook. This value then goes into our findOne wrapper function, which returns a promise. So now we can chain in a then method here. Inside the then method, we'll get a possible result from this query. So create a callback function like so. Inside this callback, simply check to see if you do have the result, and if so, invoke the done method. Here, the first argument will be a null. This will be set to receive an error in the standard style of Node.js callback functions if you want to check for server errors. However, keep it null in most cases. The second element here is the actual result that has been derived successfully from MongoDB for the user who is just logged in. Invoking the done method gets this data out from the authentication pipeline and into Passport so that it can offer it to our app for consumption. I'm sure you can appreciate the elegance of this workflow. Okay, now, assuming a user is logging in for the first time and we do not have a ready to fetch record from our local database, we'll have to create one and then return it using the done method. This is akin to registering a user on a site, only that we are doing it automatically. So let's write a helper function that takes in the profile object and writes out the same to our database as a document before returning it back to us. I'm going to use ES6 promises this time around. So begin by scaffolding out a function called createNewUser that accepts a profile object and returns a new promise. Inside this function, we'll first create a new document. For this purpose, simply create a new instance of the user model we exported out of the DB module and set values for each one of the three keys that we have. The profile picture is the first element in the array as returned in the profile object, hence index number 0. If this is not available, then we would want to set it as blank. These keys are being extracted from the profile object that we've got from Facebook, and the keys there correspond to what we requested in the profile fields configuration setting. Now, once we have a document instance, we will save this to MongoDB by invoking the built-in save method like so. This will return an error if any. And if we do get an error, we can console log out the error and also we will have to reject the promise like so. Otherwise, if all goes well, we will resolve the promise and return the instance to the new chat user. Let's export both the createNewUser and findOne methods out of the helpers library so that they are available to the outside world. Now, back in our auth module, we'll invoke the create new user method like so, and we'll pass in the profile object. In the subsequent then method, since we are returning a promise, we'll get access to this new chat user instance, which will then return back using the now familiar done method like so. If there are errors, our promise will be rejected, in which case I'll catch the error and print it out on the console like so. In fact, since we are console logging it out here, I'll remove the console.log statement from the helpers module. So there you have it. The first part of your strategy is built. Let's move forward.